18 has turned 23 today, and here's a special guest to mark that milestone with us. Rajesh Bhagavath here with us, and just like CNBC TV 18, Make My Trip is also more than 2 decades old and was started pretty much around the same time. Rajesh, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18, and as I said, we've sort of run our journeys almost parallelly. So let me start by asking you, Rajesh, so much has changed, not just for Make My Trip, but for India, and for the travel and the hospitality space. What have been the biggest changes, the big inflection points that you can recount over the past 2 decades plus?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. And by the way, congratulations, firstly. This is a big milestone, and you're absolutely right. We're getting there, by the way, turning 23 on 1st April 23. So just getting there. So pretty much actually the same number of years that we've been in existence as well. And lots have changed. I mean, over the last over 2 decades now, if I really look back, as we, sometimes sort of see out here as well, as we were turning 22, earlier this year, and we were talking about it. Just from an ecosystem standpoint, just to call out a few sort of big, disruptions or the changes or the milestones that we saw over the last 2 decades. I'm sure you would have seen pretty much the same as well. I think in terms of just in our industry, which is, let's say, travel technology industry, or overall internet-led businesses, or the ecosystem which was supporting all the internet businesses, have significantly changed. I recall the time when back in 2000, there used to be like, one payment gateway, for instance. And then now, fast forward today, the whole digital payment ecosystem has completely changed. So much so that in this area, we are actually ahead of China already. And we used to be, whenever we would draw that analogy, we would always say that, in terms of just overall infrastructure, and specifically on digital infrastructure, we might be 10 years or 15 years behind, if not more. But I think we've caught up significantly on that front. So just overall, ecosystem changing significantly in our favor in India. And then I think the game changer also was, if you really, sort of look back, in terms of just the internet access device. Yeah. If you go back in history, and it's not too far ago, where the whole market used to be, or the predominant internet access device used to be our, the PCs or the laptops, and the entire game changed in favor of small device, in smartphones. And then the penetration of smartphones in India again skyrocketed phenomenally. Today, about 600, 700 million smartphones there, and they completely changed the game in terms of, just shifting the power to individuals from metro cities to the tier 2 cities, to the tier 3 cities, and the tier 4 cities. Yeah. And so much so, if you relate it back with, in terms of, the bandwidth improving, I'm sure you would recall, and, we used to talk about it for the longest time. I remember in 2010, when we IPO'd in US, we used to be like 120 million internet users, but broadband users used to be only 10 million. And then, the mobile bandwidth, the last mile mobile bandwidth, completely changed the game. Yeah. And now bandwidth is not the question mark anymore. And now we're getting into 5G, when the 5G has been launched as well. And in your industry, there was a direct sort of benefit of that in terms of, just the rendering of the content. Now we don't really have to worry about the market shifting to huge amount of additionally sort of digital platforms coming in your space as well. So the bandwidth, I would say, would be the other sort of big, massive disruption that happened, and we've caught up significantly as well. In some of these areas, we've actually leapfrogged and done better than the Western world, maybe behind China, but we've done better than the Western world.
Yes, certainly have made significant progress there as far as the digital story is concerned. But let's talk about what's happening with the hospitality and travel story at this point in time, Rajesh. We're pretty much back to pre-COVID levels. Airports are back to capacity. In fact, that's proving to be a challenge at this point in time, with overcrowding being witnessed across major airports. In fact, we understand that the Minister, Jyotiraditya Scindia, has had a meeting just today to be able to deal with that. You know, in terms of travel trends and how sustainable this is likely to be, given the bounce back and the rebound we've seen, what are you suggesting at this point?
No, absolutely. And I saw those visuals, and I've been experiencing that chaos as well. I mean, for whatever it's worth, as the travel picked up, right? I mean, there's huge amount of travel for the last 3-4 quarters that's been happening across, and whether it is domestic or even international. So, but when you on one side you sort of visually see that chaos and you experience that, but the reality also is that and that again our minister sort of made that comment yesterday, if I recall well. That the overall, we are still little behind than the pre-pandemic number when it comes to the domestic travel flow numbers on a daily basis. But we're getting there, right? And then the overall international might still be a little behind, thanks to fares being high, maybe the capacity issues, maybe also the operational issues related to visas, etc. But the good news is as follows. The good news is the consumer sentiment remains very, very positive. And the long-term outlook remains very positive. And if you compare the India position with respect to just the domestic economy, just because of the sheer size of the India market and the consumer economy that we have, we are much better poised than the rest of the world when you compare it on any metric at this point in time, whether it's the inflation overall or the GDP growth, as we just saw the number coming out of RBI today as well, and various agencies for that matter. So I would say overall, the consumer growth, consumer sentiment is positive.
Right.
Some of these things need to improve in terms of more capacity needs to come in, and therefore fares need to get rationalized. And the operational chaos has to get over because, people have suffered, all the agencies supporting this industry have suffered in terms of talent going away, and which is slowly and gradually coming back. And, everybody is sort of overwhelmed with the demand right now and not being able to sort of cope up from a processes and the people standpoint. All that has to go away. And my sense is they'll go away in a quarter or two. And if we continue to sort of see the same consumer sentiment and get into the new year with optimism, I'm certainly very optimistic about that.
Yeah.
And the inflation, and if let's say if the like our RBI governor said, right, so the worst of inflation might be behind us.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I think the outlook continues to remain pretty positive.
Well, consumer sentiment is looking strong, but that's proving to be a challenge as far as the hospitality and aviation business specifically is concerned. And we hope that is going to be something that is going to be addressed, but there is going to be no short-term quick fix at this point in time, given the fact that there are capacity constraints, manpower constraints as well. But Rajesh Magao, a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us on this special day. We appreciate you making time for us, not just today, but through the course of the past 2 decades. And with
Thank you.
it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Do stay tuned. We've got a special guest joining us after the break.